Secretary of State Cordell Hull has led the Americans in negotiations with Japan in 1941, but it seems like it will all be for nothing. A Pacific War is around the corner. Welcome to a World War II in real-time bio special, where I take a closer look at the major or interesting figures of the war, today featuring Cordell Hull. Cordell Hull is born October 2nd, 1871 in Overton County, Tennessee. He is already politically active from a fairly young age. He gives his first public speech at only 16 during the 1888 presidential election, speaking in support of Democratic candidate Grover Cleveland. In 1890, Hull, now 18, is selected to be the chairman of the Democratic County Executive Committee for Clay County. And then in 1892, having graduated the previous year from Cumberland School of Law in Lebanon, Tennessee, Hull is elected to the Tennessee State Legislature. He goes on to serve 2 terms in the Tennessee House of Representatives in his 20s, from 1893 to 1897. Hull decides not to run for a 3rd term in the 1896 election, instead choosing to practice law full-time. But this is soon interrupted by the outbreak of the Spanish-American War in 1898, where he signs up as a captain in the 4th Regiment of the Tennessee Volunteer Infantry. His company doesn't actually see any combat, arriving in Cuba only after the war has ended. Hull spends 5 months in Cuba, though, and is primarily in charge of the legal department of Santa Clara Province. Back in America, he serves as a local judge in Tennessee's 5th District from 1903 to 1907, after which he is elected to the United States House of Representatives, representing Tennessee's 4th District in 1907. He will serve in Congress for most of the next 25 years. It is here that he will develop a defining foreign policy belief of his career. Tariffs on trade have always been a pretty big issue in American politics. Hull has been consistently in favor of low ones, but he has now come to see that as not only beneficial for American citizens, but also world peace. He will later write in his memoirs, "Unhampered trade dovetailed with peace, high tariffs, trade barriers, and unfair economic competition with war. I reasoned that if we could get a freer flow of trade, the living standards of all countries might rise, thereby eliminating the economic dissatisfaction that breeds war." Following his career in the House, Hull serves in the United States Senate from March 1931 till March 1933. Here, he speaks out against the high tariff policy of the Hoover administration. He also rejects the isolationism of the time and writes of his disappointment with America's reluctance to join the League of Nations. Following President Roosevelt's landslide victory in the 1932 election, Hull is offered the position of Secretary of State in 1933, once Roosevelt is inaugurated. He has the opportunity to promote peaceful economic cooperation in December 1933 when Roosevelt dispatches him to South America for the 7th International Conference of American States held in Montevideo, Uruguay. The relationship between Latin America and the U.S. has been fraught since the start of the 20th century, after regular American intervention in politics south of the border. Roosevelt wants to inaugurate a new era of Latin American relations based on the policy of the good neighbor. Hull's diplomatic efforts at Montevideo successfully put in place the groundwork for this, and the conference results in the signing of the Montevideo Convention. Article 8 of the convention directly states, "No state has the right to intervene in the internal or external affairs of another." In material terms, tariff barriers between the U.S. and Latin America are removed, with Hull going on to sign a dozen reciprocal trade agreements by 1941. And as Asia and Europe descend into war, steps are taken to ensure peace in Latin America. An anti-war treaty is signed in 1933, and in 1936, the nations reaffirm their willingness to respect other sovereignty and the rule of law, and to seek diplomatic redress for their grievances at the Buenos Aires Conference. Looking ahead, the good neighbor policy will take on increased significance later in the war. Following the German invasion of Poland, a Pan-American conference is called, where it is agreed that a 300-mile safety zone will be established around the Americas.
Each and all of us desire particularly to live at peace with every nation of the world. But there must not be a shadow of a doubt anywhere as to the determination of the American nations not to permit the invasion of their hemisphere by the armed forces of any power or any possible combination of powers.
But a significant blight on his career comes in 1939 with the infamous St. Louis incident. St. Louis is a German ocean liner that set sail on May 13, 1939 from Hamburg. It carries 973 passengers, most of them Jewish refugees. St. Louis first lands in Cuba, which refuses to accept the refugees. The State Department, under Hull, tries to persuade Cuba to accept the refugees, including attempts to bribe the Cuban government. However, the Cubans refuse, and after 5 days, only 28 refugees are allowed to disembark. St. Louis then sails for the U.S., but Hull advises Roosevelt that the issue is solely the business of the Cuban government and the passengers of the ship. In his opinion, the U.S. has no role to play. After being refused entry in the U.S., St. Louis returns to Europe and drops refugees off in the UK, Belgium, France, and the Netherlands. Of over 900 passengers refused and returned, it is estimated that 255 die in the Holocaust. Hull is not unique among American leaders to be indifferent to the plight of Europe's Jews. Still, his role in blocking this ship will forever taint his career. This whole time, Hull has been leading the U.S. in its diplomacy with Japan. In 1941, he has had at least 40 meetings with Japanese Ambassador Kishisaburo Nomura, but relations are not progressing. Any hope of reaching an immediate understanding ends in July with the Japanese occupation of southern Indochina, putting them within easy attack range of the Dutch East Indies and British Malaya. America reacts by freezing Japanese assets and then embargoing oil exports in August. Seeing how relations are irreparable as the new Tojo government in October will not consider withdrawing troops from either China or Indochina, Hull warns at a cabinet meeting on November 7th of the possibility of imminent Japanese conquest in the Far East. Negotiations do still continue through November, but proposals put forward by Japan make no new concessions and are unacceptable. Another Japanese proposal is received on November 20th. It offers an immediate withdrawal from southern Indochina and a withdrawal from northern Indochina upon peace with China. In return, America must not interfere in any peace negotiations, assist Japan in acquiring resources from the Dutch East Indies, resume commercial relations with Japan, and provide it again with oil. Based on cracked Japanese diplomatic codes, Hull knows that this will be the final Japanese offer. But rather than reject it outright, because there is no way they can accept such terms concerning China, Hull, Roosevelt, and other American leaders decide to draft instead a temporary agreement which can buy them time to build their military presence in the Pacific. But it carries a lot of risk, including alienating America's allies. On the night of the 25th, Hull decides, in his own words, to kick the whole thing over and issue to the Japanese a statement of principles rather than any agreement, temporary or otherwise. Roosevelt approves his decision on the morning of the 26th, and the Secretary of State promptly hands what will be known as the Hull Note over to Ambassador Nomura. The note consists of two sections. The first reiterates principles Hull considers essential for any deal, including respect for territorial integrity and sovereignty, non-interference in the internal affairs of other countries, the abolition of extreme nationalism as expressed in excessive trade restrictions, that kind of stuff. The second section calls for more specific steps that the Americans and Japanese must take together, including a non-aggression pact among the British Empire, China, Japan, the Netherlands, Soviet Union, Thailand, and the United States, a respecting of the integrity of French Indochina, and the withdrawal of all troops from, and to give up all extraterritorial rights to, China. Now, the Japanese strike force designated to attack Pearl Harbor has already set off for its target. Tojo is committed to the attack, though, and uses the Hull Note as ammunition, the reason, for the official government decision to go to war on December 1st, though as we've seen in the regular episodes, it was decided weeks before. Tojo's response to this will be called by Hull the biggest pack of lies he's ever seen when it is delivered. It is to be delivered half an hour before the Pearl Harbor attack begins, though it is not a declaration of war. Hull receives it, however, hours later. Hull seems to be aware of what's on the horizon in late November, though. He meets with the British ambassador. In a memorandum detailing that meeting, Hull writes, "I expressed the view that the diplomatic part of our relations with Japan was virtually over, and that the matter will now go to the officials of the Army and Navy." Although written in the classic understated style of diplomats, the point is clear. Japanese-American relations are now a military matter. As I said, they've cracked the diplomatic codes, but not the naval ones. So by the end of November, it is fairly obvious the Japanese are going to attack somebody. Hull just does not know who and where. And Hawaii, so far from Japan and neutral, is certainly not up there on his list of potential targets. If you'd like to learn more about the road to war from the Japanese side, you can click right here for a bio special we did on Japanese Prime Minister Hideki Tojo. And you can support us at patreon.com or at timegoes.tv so we can make more of these bios and more special episodes to help flesh out the stuff that we don't have time to cover in the regular weekly episodes. Do not forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next time.